This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan, and I am really grateful, actually. I am grateful to have this forum to talk to people I respect, people I admire, about big issues of faith, big issues about politics, just big ideas in our culture, with all kinds of interesting people from across the spectrum of ideas and backgrounds and cultures, and we do it in goodwill and in good faith. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And you know what? We need your help. We do. The simplest way to help is by telling a friend. Tell your Uncle Bob, your Aunt Tilly, your cousin Sheila about this. I have a cousin Sheila. I used to have an Aunt Rhoda. She passed away. I think everybody would like her. But the simplest way to tell a friend about us is just go right to our site. Our main site is www.politicsandreligion.us. That's www.politicsandreligion.us. Or you can feel free to connect with me on social media. I am at Corey S. Nathan. That's Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, at Corey S. Nathan. All of that helps get the word out so more people can participate in these conversations, just like the one we're having today with my new friend, Mike Leon. Can I say Leon? Like, I don't know. Is it the French pronunciation or a Spanish pronunciation?
It is a Spanish pronunciation. You can say Leon. A lot of people kill me for that. Of course, all Hispanics that are saying, why aren't you saying it Leon? I'm like, well, because white people don't say Leon. They say Leon. So I got to be Leon. So good to see you, Corey, my friend.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So my new friend, Mike, he might be an old friend. I'm sure we partied together in Rutgers at some point. Mike is a Rutgers journalism graduate with 20 plus years of TV, radio, and digital media experience, including production stops in news and sports from Fox News to ESPN to MSG Networks, just to name a few. And he is the co-host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, a top 200 news commentary podcast in the U.S. that breaks down the latest headlines featuring interviews with award-winning journalists, current and former government officials, historians, legal analysts, best-selling authors, and even yours truly. But we won't hold that against him. Mike, thanks again, man, for coming in. It's really great to hang out with you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Well, first off, right now, after you read that biography on me, I the smile on my face, it's like I actually have done stuff. You know, sometimes in life, everybody talks about imposter syndrome, and this is kind of like adjacent to it, where it's like when you have it read back to you as you get older, you're like, oh, I actually have done things. Like I actually have experiences that I can draw on. So it's pretty cool. I'm super excited to be here. You know how much I love not only your show title, I think your show title is like the net that fishermen use to grab fish. Like it's a powerful net where you're just like, I need to find out more about that. And then when you listen to the conversations, you're pretty much hooked, man. You're on that net and you're getting ready to get fried, you know? So I love being on the show, man.
You know what's funny is I noticed that your program and your network, LMN Network, we'll talk about that. There's some affiliation with ACAST. So I was looking into ACAST. I talked to some people over there today, and they said, just a thought, you might want to drop the politics and religion thing. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I'm not married to it. Like, so if some branding expert comes in and tells me we can rebrand it as some fancy name, consolidate it a little bit. But that's the whole point. It's like people don't like talking about politics and religion. Why? Because the screamers have taken over the whole space. But we're taking some of that space back. So I want to keep the politics and religion in there. They were saying for advertisers, like if advertisers are going through and they say politics and religion, they're like, oh, no, we don't want any of that. But, I think there are advertisers that are looking to advertise in spaces that are taking some of the space back for more nuanced conversations, more civil conversations, more fun conversations about these important issues. So it was an interesting side note. But
just to piggyback on that, Corey.
Yeah.
First off, advertisers are all over CNN, Fox News,
Yeah.
MSNBC, Newsmax, OAN. So the idea that advertisers won't pay to be around that content is a lie. They will pay if there's eyeballs or listeners.
Right.
So really, my thing has been, as people have told me similar things, and I don't really dive too much into religion. I dive more into the politics space, and I've had members of Congress on, but eyeballs, civil conversation and dialogue, once they listen to the show and they realize, oh, this is an actual conversation, call to actions, advertisers will be on board. Trust me, my friend.
Right.
So I would say ignore that advice that you got and keep the title, man. It hooked me in. It's going to hook other people.
That's awesome. That's encouraging. Yeah. Yeah, to your point, I've been listening. Some of my favorite programs, The Dispatch, Bulwark, Politicology. I've been listening and taking inventory of who's advertising on there. There's some really good established brands that do choose to advertise in some of those programs. But yeah, to your point, it's just keep doing what we're doing, and I think it'll catch on at some point. I was curious as I was digging into your career. I was curious: is broadcast media journalism, is that something that you were interested in as a kid, or is it something that you kind of gravitated toward in your time at Rutgers, or when did you start to make that your focus?
I've always wanted to be on television. My father worked for ABC for a long time. He was like a camera operator before he actually got into technology. And then I kind of followed the same thing. I went into television and then went into like streaming services and launching streaming apps. So it's funny how the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But not that he would take me to sets or anything like that, but I just got really interested in the television production world. And I knew that I wanted to work like at a TV network. I didn't know where. I just knew I wanted to be in it. And then journalism, you've met my co-host on Can We Please Talk? The two of us were in journalism classes together. And we used to do like these projects where you would go out on the field assignment, shoot it, do a story, like almost like a real sports type of piece. And I remember doing one of those pieces, and one of my professors, the way I did it, I was like, according to Targum News, like we got this, and that. And I remember him being like, this is not the way you're supposed to do journalism. Why would you do things like this? And most of the time it would like discourage somebody. Maybe they would drop out of that major, but it just made me want to do it more. Just like when the parent tells you don't do that, and then you end up going to do it. So TV, I love it. Like now I'm addicted to it in terms of, I'm addicted to it from a different lens, right? Because I've been behind the camera. I've been creating segments that have been on television. I've helped launch streaming services. So like I look at it from a way different lens that a consumer would look at it. And now I'm just enthralled by it because the literacy part of it and breaking down, I was telling you this off air a couple of days ago about people don't understand the difference between an on-air commentator, a contributor that's part of that network, that's being paid by that network versus somebody like me who's not paid by that network. Legal analyst that's paid by the network versus one that's not paid. Like they don't understand the subtle nuances of television. And with our show, I've decided that when we talk about subject matter expertise, especially in the media space, that's somewhere where I can go to town. My co-host has been in education for 25 years. He goes to town on education stuff. And that's been my space now to be able to talk to people about media literacy and judgment. Your one-stop should not be 8 p.m. at CNN or Fox or something like that. It should be an accumulation of all of these news sources and taking the series of facts and commonalities that are found in these articles and then interpreting that as the truth because it's been, messaged by 50, 60 or validated, by 50, 60 different outlets that are credible, that are saying these are the facts. Car fire in Queens, 2 people have died. These are the actual facts. So that's what I've taken upon myself. Long-winded answer there to tell you that I've always been interested in TV. It's just always fascinated me as a little kid, and I'm privileged to be working, in the space.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did want to ask you about the different hats that you've worn because, like you said, you've been behind the camera. You've also been involved in networks, apps, and their online presence. So I was curious about your experiences there. But you bring up a really interesting point about what are we watching? If we're watching NPR or PBS, if we're watching CNN, if we're watching our local ABC or CBS news, the 5 o'clock news, can you break down for us what we're watching and maybe give us the Reader's Digest version of how we can be more informed consumers of the news depending on what we're watching, and if you have any recommendations about how we can be more engaged, informed citizens?
Yeah, so the first thing I would start with, folks, is you have to have some type of self-awareness. I get this a lot from comments on social media when they say, oh, you had this person on, they are blah, 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 left-leaning, stuff like that. And I always tell people, that is a you problem. Those are your ears. I'm creating the content, I'm asking a question, and most of the time it's around the border or some type of other issue where we've had an immigration reporter that's covering it. And I tell people all the time, those are your ears. That's not me. I'm creating the content. Am I moderating it a little bit? Sure. Maybe I'm editing out something that she or he or she wanted me to take out, but it's your ears. That means you're hearing something else that's polar opposite of that. And now you're thinking that these two things should be, in conflict with each other, which is not the case. So that's the first thing. You have to have some self-awareness. If you've told me this off air about, we listen to different things, whether it be Ben Shapiro or even Mark Levin, something like that, just to hear their intros. We got to hear it for ourselves to hear what these folks are covering. And then we can go back to our safe spaces, quote unquote. But on the TV side, I never noticed it when I was working in it, when I worked at Fox News and I started there as a PA, and then I graduated to assignment desk and I was a writer. The way segments are built is a little bit different than what it used to be back then, because what it used to be back then was, all right, we're going to have a Republican, Democrat, same set, screaming match. See you later. Nothing gets done. Now we get either 8 boxes where there's like 7 analysts on screen with somebody on the linear television. And you're like, I can't follow any of this. So what do? You scroll down with your eyes and you look at the lower graphic. And the lower graphic is giving you 30 characters max. And it's really not the best summation of what is actually being talked about in the segment. So the first thing I would tell people is, if you're in a newsroom, like in a waiting room, a doctor's office or something like that, don't take word for word what you saw in that lower graphic with the volume off as, oh, this is what's happening. I saw it on the news. That's your first part. You should not. You should have this intrinsic quality to not be lazy and do more research about that graphic that you saw on television. That's the first thing. So turn the volume up, A, and B, do more research on what it is that you saw. The second thing that you should do is, a lot of people tend to have this. They see an anchor. We had Jake Tapper on our show. We've also had Mike Emanuel from Fox News Live. He's a friend of mine. We've had Ayman Mohideen and Mehdi Hassan from MSNBC. We've had Amna Nawaz from PBS. People see an anchor and they go, oh, no, left-leaning, Clinton News Network, right? All the acronyms that you're hearing now. And the problem is, you have to be able to decipher if the person is doing their job. On the lower graphic, it says host, Jake Tapper, the lead with Jake Tapper. He's the host. So what does a host do? A host is supposed to facilitate, ask questions. I always go to this example. When Anderson Cooper said about Donald Trump that he was like a turtle on his back, a Sun Beach turtle, orange, whatever it was, he immediately crossed the line and now became an opinion commentator on his own network. Impropriety, all of that stuff, impartiality, went out the window because he crossed over into not giving me the news anymore and being the host of a show. He threw his opinion in there into a segment. The Michelle Obama thing, right? When they go low, we go high. It's not really about that. It's more of like, don't dive into that. That's not your role. That's what the opinion commentator is for. So notice the titles and notice if it says CNN, politics analyst, or if it just says, like me, when I pop up on screen, it'll just say host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, because there's a subtle difference there. The subtle difference is one is paid for by the network, meaning they get a paycheck, not necessarily that their opinions are paid for, but that it is going to fall in line because they have a paycheck associated to it. So maybe they won't give you the raw. And then you got people like me that will come on there, say what we want, and maybe we don't get invited back, right? So that's first. Second. So judging, this is the way I kind of look at a segment. I watch something that Jake Tapper's doing, and I'll listen to his monologue at the top of the hours, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I'm just using him as in the example. He'll tell me, what's happening as the top stories. And then when we come back, when he comes onto his single shot, and now we're into the A block, which is the first segment, he'll say, the war in Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to our international correspondent who's in our London office or somebody in Kyiv for more on what just happened. That is news. That is the news that you should be listening to. Taking down, if you want to take down notes, but listening to it and taking down notes and verifying it across Reuters, AP News, Yahoo News, et cetera, et cetera. When Jake goes to break and when we come back, we're going to talk about the GOP debates happening, next week on Fox News. And he comes back and it's you and me and 2 other jamokes that are sitting there at a panel. Now, this is the opinion part of this.
Okay.
This is the opinion part of the show. These are four people that are going to give you informed perspective, but it's still their opinion. It's not the news. It's just their opinion. So people don't understand the news side of the house and the opinion side of the house. And nobody knows it better than me that worked at Fox News that was really on the news side of the house. I worked adjacent to opinion programming like Hannity, like Bill O'Reilly, because I did the top and the bottom of the hour news cut-ins. The top 5 stories. Here's what you need to know. Here's a full screener. Here's sound on tape of what happened there. So you need to judge what these folks are doing. If you consume television news, again, podcasts are great as well, just like this one, just like mine. But you really need to understand what it is that these folks are doing in their roles. Are they fulfilling them? And when it is a news segment and when it's an opinion segment, it's a huge difference because people regurgitate the opinion segment back in conversation to friends and say, yeah, I saw it on CNN. And it's like, who did you see that from on CNN? Did you see it from Corey Nathan and Mike Leon, who are not affiliated with CNN? Or did you see it from Jake Tapper talking to Paula Reed, who's a correspondent on CNN? So those are the differences right there. Turn the TV up. Don't take the graphic as, the gospel, and then understand the difference between news and opinion.
So speaking of graphics, I've heard you use the expression the graphics are preloaded. I know this is kind of getting in the weeds, but I was curious, talking about when you were working with Hannity on Fox, what does that mean, and how can we recognize it when it's happening?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is, I was telling you this the other day, Corey, like the shows are built a couple of hours beforehand. There's a system called MPS that everybody uses in commonality. And all you do is you copy over your over the shoulders, which are called OTSs, if the anchor has, a shoulder graphic over them. You copy over your full screeners. You could even copy over a segment. Hey, we're going to come back at the top of the next hour with the Trump stuff, right? So we're going to have Kate Baldwin on camera, or we're going to have Martha McCallum on camera standing up. So those are cues that everyone knows, from the director to the stage manager, everybody that's in the production wing of this segment or this entire news hour. They know what's going to be happening. When I say the graphics are preloaded, the show coming on after the show that you're watching right now is setting up. And those graphics, they're entering it into a system to call it up to see what it looks like on television. I mean, everybody previews stuff before it goes out there. People think we're just throwing it out there. You're not just throwing it out there, they're previewing it. So those graphics are preloaded for a reason. So when we come in and all of them have the breaking news, or Fox News has the alert, to kind of Pavlov's dog you and, get you to, whoa, what's going on here? And then you just realize it's the same thing from the last hour. Those graphics are preloaded. So when I gave the analogy of like Sean Hannity's coming on, he's been sitting down since like 8:20. It's not, he knows his show's on at 9:00, but his studio is lit up. He has his own control room sometimes. I've been in the building for a while. So his team is already preloading everything. And maybe if something's earth-shattering, meteor about to hit us, then we'll change out that graphic that's it will move something up and move something down in, the blocks, A, B, C, D, depending upon how long the show is. So that's what I mean by the graphics are preloaded. If Joe Biden does something good, right, that you and I may find on CNN or MSNBC, but we don't necessarily see it on Fox, they're going to come back from, at the top of the hour after Jesse Waters' show, and it's going to have a graphic that's preloaded with Hunter Biden on it, or the DOJ is corrupt, something like that. That stuff's preloaded. That's not changing. You got to give me something earth-shattering to get that out of there. So I moved that story back down. We're still going to do the Hunter story, but we got to move it back down. So that's what I mean by the graphics are preloaded. This stuff is done, it's almost like a football analogy, right? The first 12 plays are scripted before, they take the field and do the drive. This is the exact same thing. Stuff is scripted and preloaded. And even like live shows, I worked for ESPN and did Sunday Night Baseball. That stuff is done a couple days before. Like, what are we going to talk about in this 3-game series? What are we going to do on Sunday? Who's the pitching matchup? How is pitchers faced against hitters? So I can load all of that stuff and have it available so people can call it up to fill time. So that's what I mean by the graphics are preloaded.
So this is just from an observer standpoint, a consumer of news. I find myself, when big events happen, we happen to be recording this the night after the Fulton County indictments were announced. and we were all waiting to late in the night for DA Fawny Willis to come before the cameras. And what I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just my observation, is that Fox News, I was going to Fox News, and it was almost like the contributors, whether it was a Brett Baer or other contributors, were groping around for what their narrative would be. I mean, leading up to that moment, they had a couple of talking points. They were, what about Hunter Biden? And, going to clips of Republican presidential candidates who were saying it's, weaponizing the DOJ and stuff that's basically stale at this point, if you ask me. That's my opinion. But right. Once the indictments were announced, and I recognize this too, going back to January 6th itself, that if you that day I tuned into the end of Will Cow's program on XM radio, and then the beginning of Hannity's radio program on XM, and they didn't quite know what the talking points were. They were still kind of reaching for them. And it very quickly did congeal around certain talking points with regard to that. Where was your outrage when? What did you expect would happen? There are 2 or 3 things that emerged that day that then became the talking points. Is that kind of like the correspondents and the anchors are improvising in a way to find what the narrative is in that environment? Or am I just reading too much into it?
No. I mean, you're kind of half on it. The first thing is Brett Baer. See, Brett Baer, not a contributor, a host. He's their chief political anchor. Right. So if they have him appear on somebody else's show, now he's giving his opinion. When he's doing his show, Special Report at 6 p.m., or he's hosting like the debates, which he will be next week, now he's a host, he's a moderator. Right? He's just supposed to be John Stockton, pass the ball and get out of the way, right? Ask the questions and get out of the way, not interject his opinion. I think the networks do a huge disservice around big events. The best example I could give is CNN because and I hate picking on them, not because I'm a fan of those, just because I don't want to really actually pick on any network, especially if I'm going to be put on there in a few weeks. But no, in all seriousness, they do a disservice because there's too many talking heads. There's just too much noise. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. How many former federal prosecutors do you need to just sit there on standby and twiddle their thumbs? I mean, I know 3 of them that were on the segment last night, and they're sitting there for hours. And then you've got 3 reporters that are sitting outside the courtroom, Sarah Murray, you had Paula Reed, you have Kaylin Collins. They're all sit up there with a truck. You don't need all 3 of them sitting outside. You don't need 2 different studios lit up with 8 different contributors. So you can go to one panel that's moderated by Jake Tapper, one panel that's moderated by Anderson Cooper, and then you've got the 11 p.m. midnight hour. They're on standby with 3 other lawyers themselves. Like, you just don't need all of that. And the problem is that, in my opinion, they do a disservice around major events like that because it's just too many people. I want to get it from one person that has similar experience prosecuting RICO charges in the case of the Georgia stuff. Elie Honig is perfect for that. The guy's done a bunch in terms of RICO charges from a federal perspective. He was SDNY and a DOJ prosecutor for forever, New Jersey guy. And I'm using him because he's an actual friend of mine. So that's the first thing. I think the networks just do such a bad job with that and having too many people. I tend to, listen to NPR's politics podcast or NPR now. I think it's First or whatever their 6-minute news show is. I have that on my phone. I have the New York Times Daily, like the Up First show. So I'll listen to some of that to get, some added reporting around it. But the big thing that you were talking about, narratives and finding narratives, it's all different because the correspondents are actually doing the news. There's one in the courtroom, right, that was watching the clerk, waiting at the clerk's office. There's one that's actually in the presser asking Fani Willis, who Sarah Murray was asking that, questions about this indictment. Are you going to charge all of them all at the same time, like in terms of bringing them to court? So you have people like that are actually doing work. The talking heads, you got to have at least 1 or 2 hosts that are flowing this conversation, and you do have that with Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper. But you don't need 7 former federal prosecutors, 6 former criminal defense attorneys, and then 3 political analysts. Van Jones was on there. What is Van Jones doing on there? I'm sorry. When did he get his law degree? And maybe he does have a law degree, so I don't want to diminish him. But again, this is a guy who's just a politics analyst, right, for CNN. So maybe he's there for the political perspective of like how this will influence because he's worked on a campaign. Maybe that's not what I need right now. In the interest of giving people the information that they want, I need a host and I need a lawyer. And I need a lawyer that's done this stuff before or has worked in the state or actually knows the prosecutor. Give me that. Give me the steak and potatoes. Let's cut to it. I don't need appetizers. I don't need 100 desserts offered to me. And I think the networks do a bad job in that. And with the narrative stuff that you were mentioning, I don't necessarily know that it's that they're searching for narratives. I think it's more so that it's live TV. When I go on television, for example, if I go like on a Saturday night panel, they send me the topics Wednesday. If anything changes by Friday, they will update me as to what they're going to talk about. You know, I've been on one show where I was on for 3 segments in a row. That's like 45 minutes, but I was really on camera for, maybe, 5 to 6 minutes of that. So, and shame on them for not having me for more. But that's where you have to actually figure out, okay, what do I want to talk about when they ask me this question? Because they don't give you the question. They give you the topic. They don't tell you what the host is going to ask you. Of course not, nor should they, right? What is this? The DNC with the Hitler? No, I'm joking. But there's a hint of truth in that. So, like, in all seriousness, you have to figure out on the TV side, you got to juggle between a question that's being asked and what it is you want to convey because you know the topic. It's an incredibly hard thing to do. I've mentioned it a bunch on the show, and then you have somebody in your ear saying, hey, 10 seconds to break. It's very tough to do. But that's where I think that people are not necessarily trying to find buzzwords or things to shape the narrative. I think it's that they're trying to find out information. They're being told one thing in the ear, and then the producer's like, we got to cut to this, we got to cut to that. Oh, actually, we're going to break in with this. It's a lot harder in a live environment. In a pre-recorded environment, wink, wink, 3:00, Martha McCallum, that guest that's coming on already knows what the topic is going to be about, and they know they can get those buzzwords off, right? They can say weaponization, and they can drop in Hunter Biden and play the whataboutism game because it's easier because it's not live TV.
So here's a tough question. It might get you into trouble with your old pals from Fox News. As we saw with the Dominion Voting Systems case against Fox News, there's been a problem when it comes to facts and truth, at least in certain news outlets. So one, if a supposed news organization's commitment isn't necessarily to facts and truth, what are their commitments?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. Listen, I don't want to keep invoking Jake Tapper because I think if you do it enough times like Beetlejuice, he'll appear. But in all seriousness, he wrote in his book, All the Demons Are Here, that he came on our show to promote, and you've probably seen him on the book tour. He wrote about a 70s style character that's in the mold of Rupert Murdoch that wants to do sexing up journalism, right? Let's sex up the lead. Let's, get a little bit more clickbait. At the time, it was more periodical because it's a historical thriller. So based around periods in the 70s. And it resonated with me because, when I worked there at the network, fair and balanced was the slogan. Right? We report, you decide. Right. And I always would repeat that to people and they would laugh at me. And I didn't know what Fox News was like as a viewer. I knew it as somebody working there. Hey, Mike, what's the top 5 stories of today? Well, Peter Jennings just died. Oh, okay. Well, where's that obituary package? Okay, we got to load it up. Okay, who are we going to have on the phone from ABC News that's going to join this person in the 2 a.m. hour or something like that? So I worked at it from a news perspective. I did the news. The opinion folks that were on from 8 to 11, and it was really O'Reilly and Hannity and Combs, and then Geraldo would rotate here with Greta Van Susteren. The consumer's got to know that they're doing opinion. Like, you have to know that. There should be a disclaimer at the beginning of the show that says, warning, the opinions are shared in this entire, our show are solely of Jesse Waters, not representative or indicative of the opinions and beliefs of Fox News. They're never going to do that. They're never going to do that because, as you've said on my show, and as we all know, negativity does sell. We see it in sports when teams do terrible. You and I are both New York kids. When sports talk radio kind of blew up in New York, it's always because the Mets are bad or the Giants are bad or this team is struggling. The successes, while they get spotlighted, it doesn't draw as much people calling in to complain about it, and it doesn't generate as much ratings for those shows like First Take or Undisputed. And it's the same thing in news. They kind of copied each other with respect to roundtables. And shout out to my co-host Nick Savary, who's kind of made this comparison to the McLaughlin group that used to be on NBC, around the same time, I think an hour after Meet the Press. And the comparison between that and sports reporters, where like ESPN copied something similar, but they're not yelling at each other as much as they used to on the McLaughlin group, which was, a Sunday show, political analysts just raring at each other. And it always did well in the ratings because that's what sells. And I think Fox News, I struggle because I've been offered a job to go back 2 different times. And one time was to work around Tucker Carlson's content. And I couldn't do it. I can't do it, Corey. Between you and I've said this to you before, I can't deal with disingenuousness. Is he conservative? Sure. Does he believe half that stuff? No. I know he doesn't. I know people in his circle. I know people that have worked for him. I know Abby, the producer that got let go. I know contributors that he's had on this show. I know he doesn't feel like that all the times, but he wakes up in the morning and is like, got to put something out. I'm pot committed now. I can't peel back this onion or peel back my mask and show that, I'm actually a moderate Republican that believes in, social issues, but also I'm fiscally he can't do that. He can't do that. It will destroy an entire brand that he's built from bow tie to now. Right. So he literally cannot do that. And you asked about the responsibility of these networks. Of course, in an ideal world, they're responsible for the content that they're putting out there and the moderation of it. Are they responsible for the way you consume it? I mean, that's been decided, or at least it's been talked about in the legal field. I would argue that it's not. It's up to you to turn it off, right? Because it's a company that you can easily delete the app. You can easily not, ignore the channel. You don't actually hear what's going on there. But I do agree that they have a responsibility because words matter. And that's why I can't deal with The Five or shows like that, Jesse Waters Primetime, because when I start hearing the buzzwords and phrases, it brings back memories of me walking into the studio with Hannity and, seeing the script and what he's actually going to say or who's coming on and on O'Reilly's show, because he would tape at 6 before 8 o'clock. So we're going to have this guy on and we're just going to, beat him to death, figuratively, obviously, folks. And so, although I don't know what O'Reilly's past. So, but those are the kind of things where it's like, yeah, he has a responsibility to go out there because words matter and he shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. But also, that kind of stuff doesn't sell. That kind of stuff doesn't draw 3.3 million people in prime time and had him number 1 for years. Yeah. That stuff's not going to sell because if he comes out there, which you and I want him to do, which was our today's top story is blah, blah, blah. Times have changed. We can't do Walter, Cronkite anymore. We just can't do that and give you those top stories. We've got to try to sex it up at the detriment of the consumer. So all we can do, you and I, and that's why I love the name of your show. And that's why I'm trying to do, Can We Please Talk? We should listen as well, but Can We Please Talk makes more sense. It's more marketable, but we should understand what it is we're consuming and have some literacy around what it is that we're consuming and understand the intentions of folks. You may not know them, but just listen to what they're saying and then go validate it against something else that's credible. Not, somebody's blog or not Dan Bongino or stuff like that. Validate it against something that's real, that's verified, that's credible.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit because I want to believe that if we just spend our entire life eating McDonald's and Burger King, that we can never go back and start eating, great salads or filet mignon or stuff from, Michelin star restaurants. But it's kind of like this. It's kind of like I used to smoke Garcia Vegas and think they were great. And then somebody gave me a nice Avo. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I never
Right.
tasted tried a good cigar.
Right.
So I'd like to think that news can be that way too, or commentary, or analysis can be that way too. We're getting the Burger King version of it, but Tucker Carlson is a really good example where you watch what he's been doing over the last few years. But if you go back to some of the stuff that he was writing for when Bill Kristol was the editor of the Weekly Standard, he's got some good stuff in there. He's got some interesting, nuanced thoughts in there. So I don't know. I'd like to think that as human beings, as a culture, we can develop a taste for the more nuanced, for the more dynamic, for the more humane, as opposed to this everybody throwing crap at each other all the time. But I did want to. Speaking of which, I did want to get your insights, and we'll talk about Can We Please Talk. Maybe this will lead into it. You've had so many different roles, as I mentioned before. In particular, I'd like you to help listeners understand the nature of what you did for companies like MSG and Discovery Networks, because they were different roles. You weren't producing, you weren't directly behind the camera. You were getting involved in some of the news spaces where those networks were showing up. So I'd like to understand what you were doing for those companies, but also more broadly speaking, how that informed your view of how we're creating content, distributing content, how we're consuming content. What is your view on all? Tell us what you did and what is your view on all that?
Yeah, so I ran digital apps in the later half of my career from 2008-9 on. I helped launch HBO Go. I helped launch MSG Go. If you live in the New York, New Jersey area and you watch the Knicks and Rangers or the Islanders, Devils, Sabres on their digital app, you're welcome, because that was my baby. And I ran that for 5.5 years. Discovery, I launched the PGA Tour's international app, which was called Golf TV. And if you use the PGA Tour app now, and you can download it, all of that stuff is creation of mine, because I was the mobile web and mobile app product manager on that. So in conjunction with my buddy Joe Mead. So the design, the look, the feel, doing focus group, usability tests with folks about, what do you like about this? Scroll with this prototype. Tell me when you click here, what do you like? And letting people kind of play around with different content is what helped shaped the way I would make these apps for these folks, right? Because you want to keep people in the funnel, but first and foremost, content's king. You got to have, Richard Pepler, who's the former CEO of HBO, would always say that. Content is king. We have Sex and the City. We have Sopranos. We have 6 Feet Under. We have Entourage. We have Curb Your Enthusiasm. We have these hits. We've won more Emmys than Showtime and these other networks. So we have it here. So they're going to come here. The goal is to cast a wider net and get more folks into the pipeline and keep them here, which is why you see Netflix and HBO Max, or now it's just Max, or Discovery Plus before, all have, when an episode ends, a 10-second countdown and they dive you into something else, because they don't want you to leave, because minutes watched, all these analytics are things that they can take back to either advertisers or shareholders. So, now that you're asking me this, Corey, like now I'm thinking back to like, boy, did I prey on people, right? Did I prey? And I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean more like I did prey to an extent. I want to learn more about your user habits, because the hardest thing to break is user habits, right? I go to ESPN first and foremost to get my sports stuff. So if I worked at Fox Sports or I worked at The Score, I need to figure out, why are people going there first and why aren't they coming over here? That was one of my missions with PGA Tour's international app. 4 million people go to ESPN's leaderboard for golf coverage, and they don't even have the stupid, a tournament. We have it here. So how do we keep people here? I got an idea, a leaderboard functionality, and the way to dive into a player's scorecard and actually watch highlights of shots that they've hit on that round. So everything that you're seeing on the PGA Tour app, it comes from a brain trust of folks that worked at Discovery at the time. And then sports is a little bit different, because you're a fanatic of the Mets. I love the Raiders and the Yankees and the Islanders. So I will watch these games regardless of if they're on Fubo TV, if they're on MSG Go, if they're on Tubi. Yeah. I don't care. I'm going to be there, right? So making fun of what channel it's on, the hardcore fan is going to go watch it. Apple TV Plus is the perfect example with some of these games. And I'm going to deal with it with Peacock, with Rutgers stuff. But casting the wider net and getting people to stay here, low periods, keeping them engaged, And that way, while they're engaged, oh, by the way, I can swipe a little ad here and maybe they purchase this because that's sellable real estate. It's one of the things that I look back at it now and I go, it's the same thing translatable to voters and voter issues and the way these guys like Frank Luntz and some of these other folks that do focus groups, I forget the girl from Accountability GOP. That's a friend. Oh, Sarah Longwell.
Sarah Longwell, yeah.
They all do. Yeah, they all do these same things right now. They're trying to find out your habits. They're trying to find out what issues mean the most to you so they can rank them on a scorecard so they can get that information and intel back to strategists that are going to be working at these campaigns. Hey, we've done focus group stuff. We found out the XYZ and stuff like that. Everyone's ideating all the time. And the way you ideate is you get as much information as you can and then implement that into, what people have given you in terms of feedback, right? I like this. I like that. I loved when I could scroll here. I love when I could do that. So I've spent the last 10 years preying on people is what I'm trying to say. That'll be the soundbite for everybody. But I think it's been great because it's helped people out there use some apps that, before you maybe couldn't discover some of this other content. And now you have all of this at your disposal and you can, for hours sit there and watch, Max or the PGA Tours app. And I'm proud of the work that I've done, but I also know that consumer habits is the most potent information out there. The way consumers consume, whether it be news, sports information. And so part of me feels like, damn, man, I kind of contributed to that mess and added to that, trying to figure out how people consume stuff and how I can give them more of it.
So based on all that, it's almost counterintuitive. I'm going to kind of blow smoke up your ass, but not really. It's counterintuitive, the quality of content that you're creating with Can We Please Talk and LMN, Leon Media Network overall. That you would think that having those insights, having that experience, knowing what moves the needle, you would create catnip for listeners, catnip for consumers. But that's not what you're doing. You're creating quality content.
That is right. So I'm so glad you asked me that, by the way. I did not know you were going to ask me. That's great. Because I literally took everything that I do, present day job, and I'm like, how can I use 1% of it? Because I don't want it to be all about this. I want to give people a chance to have their voices be heard across the areas where they're subject matter experts. The tagline for our show is we talk to people who know what they're talking about. I don't know anything about Georgia's, RICO statutes or anything about their election laws. But when we come back after the break, former federal prosecutor and state prosecutor in Georgia, XYZ person is going to be joining us to break it all down. That's the purpose of my show. When Nick and I give commentary on something, a lot of the times it's based around subject matter expertise. When we dive into Tucker Carlson and Dom Lemon both being let go, and I worked at one of the networks, I'm going to give you my perspective on that, just having worked there and having relationships still with people in the building, right? They come on my show. But also, when we come back after the break, former Fox News and CNN host and somebody who knows about getting let go from CNN, Rick Sanchez is going to be joining us to break it down. He knows both of these guys. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't really care if one person listens or 6 million people listen. And I know somebody may listen to this and say, that's impossible. There's no way you don't care. It's true, because I don't make the kind of money that other folks that are doing it right now are making. So yes, maybe I am being naive and saying like, well, if it ever does blow up to that level, will I change certain parts of it and keep giving folks the catnip? Corey, if that happens, I hope not. And I hope I'm being honest here, and people that are listening to this and you yourself as well, hold me to that, because what I want to do is I want subject matter experts to tell me what's happening. I want to break down the latest news making headlines. And I'm doing it in the fashion that I did for a former news program, which is I take it from a production element, I break down the topic, we're going to play some sound, we're going to react, and then when we're going to go to break, and then when we come back, here comes an expert that's going to talk to us. They've written a book about it. They're a journalist covering it. They're a legal analyst. And if people love that, great. The other shows that are part of Leon Media Network, you can check us out over at leonmedianetwork.com, are in sports. We have a guy who's in boxing and MMA. That's a 4-time Emmy-nominated producer, that announcer for Fight TV. And his show's presented by DraftKings, and the biggest names in boxing and MMA come on his show. Perfect. You want to learn more from, Canelo Alvarez as he has his fight coming up, this weekend against, Charlo. He's going to be on Ask the Experts with Karim Bhatia. Back Your Play with Q is a show with Brandon Jacobs, the former New York Giants running back, and Rich Quinones, the former ESPN radio host. They break down sports topics, just like you and I would listen to sports radio back in the day. And then the other shows are really specialized with subject matter experts. A politics podcast that's coming with a former chief of staff to a member of Congress and also the House Speaker, John Boehner, back in the day. So like somebody that's in politics and going to be talking about these stories that happen in Capitol Hill, what it is like working in DC, right? Giving you that experience and breakdown. And then an influencer that is in the leadership and coaching space that wants to kind of redefine what leadership means. Something's broken with leadership, and going to have thought leaders on that are, impactful in the leadership space. I want to give people these voices, but I also know that, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, shut up and learn. I'm very big on that. And I apply that in my day job. I work in sports and I know a lot about sports. But, the best example I could give, the other day, I met with some guy, me and my friend who's British, coworker of mine, and he played rugby at university out there in London. We met some guy from, a rugby organization. Corey, I said 3 words. How was your flight? Like 4 words, because I don't know anything about rugby. And my friend said to me afterwards, he's like, wow, I've never seen you be so quiet. It's like, what do I have to chime in? I don't know much about rugby. I want to learn more. I want to soak it up. So we need to have that self-awareness, folks, listeners out there. If you don't know what you're talking about, shut up. If you truly do not know what you're talking about with the issue, learn about it until you become at least educated enough that you feel you can speak intelligently on it and have these type of conversations. It's the biggest thing. Self-awareness is so lacking. If it was a Madden rating for a lot of people out there, it'd be an 11. You got to know when you talk too much. Run DMC used to have this famous song. You talk too much and you never shut up. And if you don't know what you're talking about, you need to shut up and just listen. And that's what I try to do on Can We Please Talk. I want to let people talk to me so I can listen, so I can learn information.
Yeah, no, it's true. You're true to your word about that. I was listening to the recording of it, of what we did, and I'm like, man, I'm talking too much, and Mike isn't talking at all. So it reminds me of that saying, better to keep your mouth shut and let people wonder whether you're a fool than open your mouth and start talking and prove the point. So I ruined it, but it's something along those lines.
No, but Corey, in fairness to you, like, you're talking about religion, and religion is something where, look, I mean, I was an altar boy from like 5th to 7th grade. I went to Catholic school, St. Francis of Rome in the Bronx. And my parents went to a Christian church throughout those years as well in the Bronx in Crossroads Tabernacle. So like, yeah, I grew up in the church, but like, can I quote scripture from Luke or from Matt? Like, I can't do it like how I've heard you do it on other shows and break things down in the world of theology. Like, I can't do that stuff. I mean, I had intro to Old Testament at Rutgers. I got a C+. So clearly I'm not doing well in terms of that. And so I need to learn and get subject matter experts to tell me a little bit more about that. We want to learn more about the Presidential Records Act. Here comes Dr. Lindsay Chavinsky, a famous presidential historian, and sits on the board at SMU. Like, why am I commenting on history? I don't know that. This is not my subject matter expertise. And I think we need to let the subject matter experts, not that we shouldn't question them, that's different, but listening to them, if they're educated enough about that, they should be allowed to go first and tell us what it is. We're not getting on that plane tomorrow and, you're going to let me fly. I've never been to pilot school. I don't know anything. We're going to let the pilot fly. We're going to listen to him and then, or her, excuse me. And then we're going to, figure out how we get there. And then afterwards we can talk about what we know about.
Yeah. So now I got to ask you a little bit of inside baseball or inside podcasting questions. To your point on Can We Please Talk, you have such great guests. I'm very proud of the guests that we've had on here, including you. And there are a few shows that I look at, I'm like, wow, that is really great. That's a great lineup. Those are you're guilty by association, but you're also successful by association. So when I go to a show and I go down their episodes and I see people that I want to listen to, you've already mentioned a few right here, Mehdi Hassan or Amna Nawaz or Jake Tapper. How do you? I'm guessing that there are some people that you know from your broadcasting career. But even with people that there's a certain way that I would imagine you have to approach them. But then also, I'm guessing that there are people that you're 1 step or 2 steps removed from, you don't know at all. How do you approach the people that you do know a little bit, but also how do you approach people that don't know you and you don't know them at all to come on your show?
Well, the network folks are a little bit different. I have the relationship with Fox News, so I do get to have the people that I have identified from Fox that I want you to listen to. The war in Ukraine, Trey Yingst is out there all the time on the front lines. Friend of mine, I reach out to Fox PR. Hey, we want to have Trey on. Here's a block of times if he can make it, et cetera, et cetera. So that works a little bit different in the network sphere. It takes me a little while to build up that kind of resume because you got to have enough of these folks on where like you can kind of use it as a showcase. Hey, look, this person's been on, so I would love to have, Jake Tapper on or Mehdi Hassan. And then once they come on the show and they realize the dynamic between me and my co-host, the preparedness that we have with the questions that we're going to ask, then they are, this is great. And now they sign off on it for future endeavors if we do want to have them on again. The hardest issue has been for me right now, I want to have on a bunch of different folks from the GOP side for the debates. And by the way, I'll take it as a challenge if anybody out there is listening. Governor Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, Will Hurd, we've invited all of these folks on the program, know some of the comms directors, have communicated with folks through different social channels. I kind of lean on the guest booker experience of not only working adjacent to guest bookers, but now dealing with guest bookers, trying to get on TV, where I take a templatized message to them. This is who we've had on. This is what we want to have him or her on about. This is how long it's going to be. And here's links to the work. And like you just said, the work speaks for itself. And it's been great to see that members of Congress, we have a few coming up over the next couple months. Obviously, the recess is happening right now as you and I are recording it. So, a lot of people are on vacation, not going to be coming on. But as we get into the teeth of the fall, we're going to have more members of Congress on from both sides of the aisle because I want to have conversations with folks that are out there that are doing something policy-wise. If you want to yell and scream about weaponization of this and that, and you are hypocritical to something that happened before, and you want to play the whataboutism game, I don't have time for that. I want to deal with people that are actually sitting on committees that are talking about things that they can implement and put into practice. I've had a few members of Congress on. Seth Moulton, who's a representative from Massachusetts, Jamal Bowman from my district in New York, when I lived in the Bronx and Yonkers. We've had both of them on the program. Representative Veronica Escobar is going to be on. We've reached out. Representative Chip Roy is supposed to be on. So I've tried to reach out to folks that I've watched content about them, not so much the news segment stuff. It's been longer form stuff where I'm like, that is really interesting. Let me reach out to their comms director. Let me show them what we've done and see if we can get them on the program. I think the biggest thing that I've kind of implemented for my show has been something I heard on How to Make It in America, the former HBO show, where somebody was like, don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me what you've done. And it took us a while to get there. But now that we've shown people what we've done and people see our roster of guests along news and politics, they're more likely to come on. I mean, recently, I want to say 6 months ago, somebody was like, and who's been on your show now? And then they got a text from somebody that's been on my show and they were like, oh, never mind. I know who you guys are now. So that's been the coolest thing. And then on the flip side of that, somebody at Fox News, they're trying to get booked for a segment, one of the Fox News Sunday panels. And the producer said to me, oh, I know who you are. And like the way they said it, I was like, oh, I don't know if that means I'm going to get on or not, because I don't really bash the network that hard. But so we'll see more on that when we come back after the break.
Yeah. So actually, I am curious about your own views. You've been around the news for a long time, reporting the news, producing the news. Have you developed strong opinions on different issues, politicians, or are you more of a just the facts kind of guy?
Ooh, Corey. This is very Wizard of Oz, who's back there. And if I show you the curtain here. So without telling you my political leanings, I will tell you this. And I think you and I are aligned. A lot of people say this, but they don't mean it. A lot of people say this, but they don't mean it. I am left of center, social issues, right of center, fiscal issues. And the reason I say that is because, and people will give the smirks and they'll give the, oh yeah, here we go. It's like my father's a black man. Okay. My father's Afro-Cuban and my mom's Puerto Rican, right? I grew up in the Bronx. I know what it's like to be around 90% blacks and Hispanics and then get dropped off in a white neighborhood in 8th grade and try to assimilate into a white neighborhood. And then going to a big college that has a diverse campus, but then other campuses that are not as diverse, and getting into that school because of the benefits of affirmative action. I know all about that. And I've done TV segments on that. So again, self-awareness, right? That's where I tend to lean right now in terms of issues. I'm very issues driven. So when I look at a ballot, for example, my wife and I do this all the time. You know, we're here in the state of Florida. We take a look at the ballot. We bring up the 2 names. We take about 50 minutes to fill out any type of ballot because we're searching the names for those judges, cases that they've presided over. Now, I know people are going to be like, oh, that's crazy. I'm never doing that. I'm just going to, you know, if it's a D, if it's an R. No. This is the problem, because then you vote for that person and what happens is you're like, why is that person presiding over there? What did I vote for? I don't even remember what I voted for. The down ballot races are important, folks. And if you don't take the time to look at what these candidates have either said publicly, have done in their front facing jobs right now, you're doing a disservice to yourself and your community and the people around you and your vote. The whole thing that we're fighting for is your ability to vote. And you're just, oh, you know what? I can do this in 5 minutes. It's not a 5-minute process. It's like a 45-minute process, maybe even longer, as you're looking at the ballot and really judging what it is those candidates stand for. So me and my wife have been doing that for years now. She's only been my wife for the last 6 years. So, but we've been doing it, you know, I would say a couple years into our relationship. And what I've started to do now is people outside of the show will ask me, well, what do you think about Biden on this? What do you think? And I struggle with those answers because I'm not the political commentator on our show. If you've listened to our show, Nick is more of the political commentator because we switched roles a couple episodes into the series. I said, look, I'm a host. I'm very good at asking questions. I can book us guests. I can get them here, get them to be comfortable. And I don't want people to get solely my opinion unless I'm incredibly passionate about it. School safety and school shootings, I'm incredibly passionate about is having kids in schools right now. You know, take this thing out of a sentence and that person, yeah, they can go in there with a knife and a nunchuck and do damage. It's not going to be the same amount of damage, folks. It's just not. It's just not. And I will die on that hill, proverbial hill, and proverbially die. But like, you know, it's real simple. Like we can talk about all the other things and figure out solves for people in the funnel of having mental health issues. But if they don't have access to that thing, they can't do the stuff that they want to do to as many people as they want to do it to.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to take away guns. Nobody's coming to your house. In the history of this country, well, again, I shouldn't say that. But when have people in the last 100 years come to your house and knocked on the door and said, give me that gun? Unless it's like some local thing that they're giving some type of buyback program. That doesn't happen, folks. No one's coming to take your gun. We get it. You have a right to it. We don't want to stop that. We want to limit the access that other people have to that. So to answer your question, Corey, you can see it. I'm passionate about things like that will affect friends, family, immigration. You know, my dad came here from Cuba in 1960. You know, that's a huge thing for me because as a Cuban who understands the Cuban vote down here in Miami, Cubans love closing the door on the people behind them. They love doing that. The Latino community is very notorious for that. Sorry, Latinos, that I'm painting us with a wide brush, but it's true. We get here and it's like, oh, I don't remember anything that happened before. Communism, socialism, Marxism. Let's make them all three one word. It's like they're not all the same thing. And also, this is not a communist state. No one's at the line right now at the grocery store being handed a generic bottle of this and a generic soap, and then you got to come back in 2 weeks to pick up your next part. That doesn't happen here in America. So the people that use that word as a buzzword drives me crazy because my father saw what that looked like, or at least the infancy of it, before he left Cuba in 1960. So I feel passionate about issues like that. And I've said this to you when we recorded on our show, I really have started to look at it the way other voters are starting to do it. Single issues. This is the most important thing to me right now. You know, not so much book bans or like things like that, age appropriate stuff. We can get into all of that, but I look at it from single issues. Who is really, wants to get sensible gun legislation out there? Who's that person? Because that's who I want to vote for. Right. If that person happens to have an R next to their name and then they've got some really cool, fiscal policies, that can help the economy, okay, great. But I'd rather be alive so I can enjoy the economical benefits as opposed to being dead, right? Yeah. Or being shot, just going to the mall or going to an H&M on a Saturday to return something. So that's kind of where I live without giving you the entire, you can kind of pick up on where I live there, but that's really where I live. I live in terms of issues. And I on the show, I say it all the time. People have told me I should make it into a t-shirt. It's not about R&D, folks. It's about right and wrong. It really is about right and wrong to me. Something is clearly right. Something is clearly wrong. We should all be on the side of right. We shouldn't be on the side of wrong.
Amen. All right. So I got the TP&R question. One more question, a piece of business, and we'll wrap up. So TP&R question, talk politics and religion without killing each other. What do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So people who think differently than we do, who have different beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible?
Oof. Oh, baby. You ask everybody this? Boy, this is going to be a hard one. Jeez. I struggle with this because there was a fracture in my family, where we stopped talking to a few folks, multiple gun owners, posting things after Uvalde that were incredibly insensitive, joking about certain things after the George Floyd stuff. And I was like, I can't talk to these people anymore. I can't do it. Sky's blue, sun's yellow. If you can't meet me at certain things there, I don't think you and I should be having a conversation anymore, to be honest with you. And I know that kind of kills the point of talking politics and religion without killing each other, because I'm not killing anybody. I'm just letting them be. You want to live in that ethos. You want to live in that echo chamber or that ecosystem. That's the beauty of this country. It's a free country, and you're allowed to dive down rabbit holes and get consumed by it. I would tell people, check out the podcast American Radical that my buddy Ayman Mohideen did about his friend from high school's sister-in-law that fell down the rabbit holes of what QAnon and January 6th was all about. And she's one of the folks that got trampled in January 6th, Roseanne Boylan, and ended up dying. I think it's her name, Roseanne Boylan. And it's because people were like, she would be on YouTube going down these rabbit holes and stuff like that, conspiracy theories. And it just ate her up, where next thing you know, she's doing a 14-hour drive from Georgia up to DC on January 6th. So it's a cautionary tale for people out there. To the broader question, we can talk to each other civilly. I've dealt with this right now. My daughter is in school. You meet the parents and you talk to the parents. What do you do? And the first thing I always lead with is, I work in sports, which is my day job. I tend to not lead with the podcast. Somehow along the way, because me and my wife are nice people, we tend to follow each other on social media. And then from social media, they tend to find out a little bit more about the show. And that's where I've had conversations on the golf course, basketball courts with friends of mine that are really friends of mine now that, hey, I like what RFK is saying, or I like, XYZ. And I have to restrain myself. So self-awareness I talked about, self-restraint. Restraining yourself in terms of letting them tell you what it is that they like or dislike about this person. And when you're correcting that person, because you know the facts of it, correcting it in the most nicest way possible. There's an author over my shoulder, Jared Yates Sexton, that has a popular podcast called The Muckrake Political Podcast. He's done this great book, and he came on our show and he said, one of the things that I learned about people was if you just talk to them like a detective, let them tell you the details of what happened, then you'll find out a little bit more as to why they have fallen down this conspiracy hole, or why they think that Joe Biden is weaponizing the DOJ and he's just prosecuting his current challenger for president, as opposed to the former president breaking some laws himself. And it's, as we're going to find out in the court of law, but that is the root of it. Getting it out of people and talking, but it doesn't happen without you being self-aware of some of your leanings and the way you are maybe argumentative or not argumentative, the way you shut down, and also being able to say, okay, let me take this off for a second, my guard, and let me listen to the other person, hear what they have to say, not roll my eyes, not do all these things from a body language perspective that would turn that person off, and really listen to it. But again, I would give the caveat, Corey, and it blows up the entire show here. The caveat is fact, fiction. Not my facts, not your facts, the actual facts. I say this all the time, man. The shirt I'm wearing is green. Whether or not it makes me look stupid is an opinion. One's a fact, one's an opinion. If you're debating me on the color of the shirt, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm literally not talking to you anymore. It says it on the back. The manufacturer has signed off that it's black. Like we're not green. Excuse me. We're not doing this. We're not arguing about it. We can argue about the second one. We can't argue about the first. So 3 things I leave them with: be self-aware, know when to shut certain things down, in terms of like your guard and stuff like that, and open up and listen. But also make sure that it's rooted in fact. Yeah. There's no such thing as my facts, alternative facts. It's a fact. Facts. Make sure that the conversation is rooted in fact.
Good stuff. So being self-aware, knowing when to shut it down, having healthy boundaries is what some folks would say. And, not having to have alternative facts. Facts are facts. I like that. All right. Last question, a piece of business. Any questions for me?
Corey, I asked you this when you came on our show, but I didn't get to ask it kind of the way I wanted to ask it, which was really like, I've heard you on other shows about the religion part of this. And I really want to learn more about how religion has consumed the right-wing party, how it's been hijacked. You told me, it's for a longer conversation. They've been doing this for forever. But like, people out there think if I'm religious, I can't be a Democrat. And that is so weird to me. There's so many examples of Democrats that are in churches on Sunday. Why have they been able to grab this? I'm a religious guy. I believe in Jesus Christ. I say a prayer before I go to bed every night. Now, I'm in church all the time. No, but I just don't get how one party has been able to really hijack and take over mundane symbols in this country: freedom of religion, freedom of expression. I can put a flag out there. We see the flag. We know who that person. Yeah, they'll be at the Trump rally later tonight. Yeah. And it's like, why is that like that? How are you going to be able to talk to people that are like that with this show? Like, how have you done any outreach to people that are like that to kind of break down how religion has been hijacked by the GOP, or like how, mundane things have been kind of hijacked by that side of the aisle?
Yeah, I have actually. I've spent the better part of the last 20 to 25 years doing it, basically. Whether I'm talking to experts from different angles of it who've studied history, theology, sociologists, leaders. We just had Dr. Russell Moore on the program, and I've spoken to him a few times. And I study this stuff, but I'm also in it on a personal level. So I keep on going, for whatever reason. Maybe I'm masochistic in this way. I keep on going back to these guys that I went to Bible studies with. I keep on going back to these folks I became friendly with where my kids used to go to school, a Christian school. Because in one way it fascinates me. In one way it really, really troubles me that, if we say that our priority is that we defer to the authority of Scripture, and Scripture happens to say something that feels uncomfortable to somebody because of their political preferences, because of their social prejudices, then, hey, let's take a look at that Scripture. And let's take a look at, and listen, if you come out the other side saying, you know what, my political preferences and my social disposition on social issues takes precedence over what Bible is clearly saying, then okay, let's just be honest about it, right? But if you say that the Bible comes first and you derive your political positions from what the Bible's saying, and it happens, and we happen to be reading from, say, Leviticus 19, which by the end of the chapter, it's pretty clear Leviticus 19 is pretty much as open border policy on immigration as you can get, then, hey, let's be honest about it. Now, I'm not saying that we should all have an open border policy, but I'm just saying let's read our Scripture contextually, properly. If we say that it's the authority, then let's defer to it. Let's try to understand what it's saying. Let's not start with our predisposed a priori preferences and then try to back little broken shards of Scripture into it. So, that's one thing. I keep on going into these conversations because I think that, and one of the reasons I'm doing the show that I'm doing is because I want to get better at it. Not that I want to get better at it so that I can convince people that I'm right and they're wrong. That's not it. But if we're in relationship together and we're committed to certain things like facts are facts, or like like trying to understand the virtues that are espoused in Scripture and trying to embody that, whether it's for ourselves, for our families, for our community, for our extended family, then let's do that. Let's do that project together. We might come out the other side disagreeing on some things, or we might come out the other side of this particular conversation and say, I got more questions. Let me go back and read up on some stuff, and let's get together next week, have another beer next week, have another coffee next week. So I want to be committed to the relationships so that we can go through this thing together and come out the other side, whether it's better for ourselves or better for the community at large, leaving its community, leaving its planet in a little bit of a better place. In Hebrew, there's an expression called tikkun olam, healing the world. I think at the end of the day, we're all committed to this project. The people that I hang with are committed to this project of healing the world. There are problems in the world. Let's hang together. Let's figure it out together. Let's diagnose what some of the problems are together, and let's figure out how we can contribute to making it a little better. Tikkun olam, healing the world. So,
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been. I wanted to add to the discourse. I didn't want to come in and yell. I don't want to do confrontational journalism. I also want to talk to people that I do disagree with. But again, as the host, I want to ask questions and learn more information about it. So I'm with you, man. Like, again, your show title, and I just think politics and religion are so intertwined right now. And you see it all the way down to when somebody goes on TV and the lapel that they're wearing. Like, you can see all of those things are plotted out. And it's because of religion appeasing to a faction of folks that are going to vote for you, that are, in the churches on Sundays. And it's really intertwined with politics. You see it all the time. I see it with friends right now that are just very, the LGBTQ plus community, right? I don't understand it. I don't get it. I hate it. Like, it's against everything that's in the Bible. It's amoral and stuff like that. I get it, but the Bible also teaches you other things that are in Scripture. If you're going to loosely interpret one part of it, love thy neighbor as thyself, right? Like, there's other parts of this that if you're not going to read the entire book, it's all subjective, is what I would say. So it's why your show title gravitated towards me when I was on Instagram one day. I'm like, man, this is exactly what is happening right now. In modern politics, it's like on TV, you don't see the religious part of it. But when you get them in longer settings, politicians specifically, you'll get these Republican town halls. You can watch one of them on YouTube. Religion comes up right away. And we all know the famous clip of former President Trump answering, not answering a question about his favorite passage. Yeah, exactly. So many to judge. There's a bunch. We leave it on there because my Donald Trump impression is not that good.
That's not bad at all. All right. So how can folks follow you, find more information about Can We Please Talk and LMN, your network, and all the great work that you're doing?
Folks, here comes Mike Leon Podcast Voice. You can visit us, leonmedianetwork.com. Head to our Instagram handle, Can We Please Talk Podcast, on Twitter at Can We Please Talk. Leave off the E. We're on TikTok, Can We Please Talk Podcast. But truly follow all the great shows that are happening over at the network, leonmedianetwork.com. Follow our show, Can We Please Talk, Apple, Spotify, Google, Good Pods, everywhere. And follow our YouTube channel for all the video portions of the interviews that we've done over at Can We Please Talk Podcast on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button for me. Please, 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 pretty please. I gave you 4 pleases in there. We really appreciate it. So that's where you can find me.
Mike, this is awesome, man. I really enjoy hanging out with you. Even though you're a Yankee fan, I won't hold that against you. Mets fans, Yankees fans can hang together without killing each other, right?
That's right. It's like that Blood and Crips meme that's out there where they're holding up the colors together. Hey, listen, I mean, if the Yankees bullpen is going to blow another game in South Florida, I'm going to lose it. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's been great to be on with you, Corey. In all seriousness, man, keep doing what you're doing. You ever need any advice or even any type of pick-me-up, you let me know. You hit me up first, because I love giving people pick-me-ups that are trying to do something to add to the discourse. It's why I gravitated towards your show. I think you're doing a great job with it, man. Continued success to you, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I might take you up on that sooner than you think. But for now, let me just close by saying, if you dig what we're doing here, please hit that subscribe button, leave your review, comments wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend about TP&R. Don't forget to tell your Aunt Tilly about talk politics and religion without killing each other. politicsandreligion.us, www.politicsandreligion.us. You can find me online at Corey S. Nathan. It's Corey with an E and S as in Sam at Corey S. Nathan. Now, we'll talk some politics and religion, Yankees and Mets, with gentleness and respect. And have a great week.